This is Adam Quang, and this is the Happiness Conversation. I am with
Jeff Bowen.
And what do you do, Jeff?
I am a retired social worker, and I'm currently pursuing an amateur photography project called The Human Family,
Right.
which is housed on Flickr, an amateur photography
Right.
website.
And that's how we met.
And that's how we met.
All right, so this whole project is about happiness. And so I'm just going to start with a simple question, ask you, what is it that makes you happy?
Well, I think what makes me happiest is relationship. It's my belief that as humans we're social creatures, and we are at our best when we're stimulated by human company and in relationship with other people.
Right.
So I would say what makes me happiest is my relationships within my family and my relationships with people that I meet outside my family.
So what you're saying is to sustain happiness is the connection between you and the people around you.
That's right.
And how do you create a connection and how you keep it going?
Well, for many years I was a therapist. Significant part of my life pleasure, which was interacting with people and meeting new people and getting a view of how they see the world. And I stumbled onto an amateur photography project, and it wound up providing me an avenue for meeting a huge range of diverse people through pursuing the project. And it started off as primarily just a photography project. I wanted to become a better people photographer, but I quickly realized that the social worker in me sort of took over, and I became fascinated by the people I was meeting.
Right.
So I pursued it as a photography project, but it kind of morphed into a kind of a humanistic type project. Vision of it is that it's turned out to be making the world a friendlier place one click at a time.
The project is basically what your connection, you're building up connection, and this is what keep you going, like keep your interest, keep your vitality. Why do you do that?
That interest value in meeting people, and I think there's also the challenge. When I began the project, the initial goal was to meet 100 people, and it had to be people that I had never met before in my life. So it required a sort of an outgoing push.
Right.
And even though I've been in a people-oriented job all my life, meeting strangers was something that I was never terribly comfortable with.
Yeah, and I think there's some studies say that after you're 20, it's harder to meet people because we get more comfortable with ourselves, or we actually get boxed into that cycle of our own inner world. And then it's harder to step outside to meet more people. That's why a lot of kids, when they're in school, kindergarten, you see them easily meet other people, meet other kids to play. We don't do that anymore. In the playground, the kids just come up, oh, can I play with you? And they just start playing.
Yeah.
As adults, we don't really do that. We have all this preconception, judging from other people. What's it they want from you? Is it what I can get from them? So we have a preconceived. When you approach people, how do they react? And
well, that became a very fascinating subject
Right.
in itself, Adam. Is my anticipation was that I knew it was going to be very difficult to walk up to a complete stranger and ask them to be a part of my photography project by letting me photograph them and find out a little bit about them.
Right.
And I really expected everybody to tell me to get lost and to meet me with a lot of suspicion. And I have encountered some of that. It wouldn't be honest to say that hasn't happened.
Mm.
But others who are doing the same project, and it's an international group that we're all pursuing the same thing. We've all learned that a part of the project is learning how not to take rejections personally. And so I have sort of relabeled rejections as being people who are declining, they're not rejecting. And I've learned that when people decline participation, they could be doing so for any one of 1,000 reasons, most of which have nothing to do with me as a person. And when that happens, I just sort of say, oh, well, it's my loss. You would have made a great photo.
Yeah.
At any rate, it was great meeting you. Hope you have a great day. Some people, if they look like they're on the fence, it's like, they could go either way. I'll say, is there some way I could encourage you to say yes, because I would really like to have you in my project? I'm always looking for that fine line between encouraging a person and twisting their arm. What I've discovered is that a large number of people are open to this kind of unexpected experience in their day. And I think it just speaks to the fact that we are social creatures, and people are surprisingly interested in telling their story. People are on a continuum of being extremely private or being extremely public. And I find young people tend to be much more public, and I think it's probably the influence of social media, where young people tend to broadcast the most intimate details of their life and sort of think nothing of it. But people, by and large, enjoy telling their story and enjoy having someone who's expressed an interest. And I think that's been the key to the whole thing, is each of us doing a project like this has to find their own approach to breaking the ice with people. And mine is that I always lead by giving people my first name. So I'm sharing something personal of myself right from the bat. So I think that indicates that it's a two-way street. It turned into a goodwill project, but it also turned into a window on the world. And I had that window on the world through my working career because I was constantly meeting people whose view of life and the world was entirely different from my own.
Right.
And I wouldn't have stayed in the job if that hadn't fascinated me. As my wife said, well, you found a great way to retire and not retire. And I said, what do you mean by that? She said, well, you always enjoyed your job. You enjoyed meeting people, finding out how they see the world. Now you're just doing it without any responsibility.
That's so true. So how does this make you happy?
How does it make me happy? I think one of the things that really makes me happy is doing something unexpected in public and overcoming a person's likely anxiety about what this is all about and what my motives are, and creating a positive experience that in fact sort of engenders a sense of trust between strangers. At the other end of the continuum is walking up to a person who's walking across Dundas Square and saying, excuse me, my name is Jeff, I'm doing a photography project. Could I speak to you for a moment? I would like to take your photograph and I'll tell you about my project. So that's like a very deliberate effort. But what I've noticed is that because walking up to strangers and speaking to them and asking something of them, that participation is by no means a sort of a natural thing. I've done it like, I can't say how many times I've done it. I've taken something like 980 project photos over the course of the last 2 or 3 years. And that doesn't count people who declined. If I don't go out, it always takes like a certain mindset. I have to be open to meeting new people. I find that I have to be in a fairly positive and upbeat mood.
Yes.
And if I don't get out because life gets busy with other things, if 4 or 5 days go by and I haven't gotten out, I get nervous about the fact that, well, I feel that there's something missing in my life, but I also feel as though I might get rusty and lose my confidence. There's probably a little bit of an element of salesmanship involved, as you need to come across in a positive, friendly way.
Right.
And over again, that's what people tell me convinced them to do it, is they just say you seemed like an eager guy and a really nice person and I trusted you.
All right, so I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What one thing you wish or continue to do that will bring you more love and contentment?
I talked to other people who had retired and sort of was curious how they went about it, and nobody has like the perfect answer to that, but everybody will acknowledge that it's a huge change in your life.
Yes.
That ripples through just about every aspect of living. And yet the one answer I got that I heard more often than anything else was, think about the things that you've always wanted to do but never had the time to do, and now's your time. Do them. I've always been interested in photography, but I really didn't have a whole lot of time to pursue it, so I've done that. The other thing that I was aware of is that I seem to be built with a fairly high level of curiosity. And yet I've often been hesitant to satisfy my curiosity by exploring and asking.
What would you give that advice to your younger self that would make you more happier?
Don't be afraid to answer your curiosity, I think would be it. And it's interesting that that's one of the questions you were asking, how I get people to open up in my project. That's one of the questions that I didn't invent it myself, but I heard another photographer was using it. What's the advice you would give to your younger self?
Yeah.
And it opens the door to interesting insights.
So would you say that being more adventurous and that would make you a happier person? So you like to explore things, different things?
Years ago, I would walk down the street and I would see a construction guy over a manhole with a bunch of equipment going down into the hole. And I would wonder, I wonder what in the world is going on there. And I would walk on by and I would never know. Now I'm much more likely to say, what are you up to? I'm just really curious.
Yeah.
And people will tell me. Or, just small everyday things like that. I'm much more inclined when I wonder, what's this all about, or what's that all about, or like I saw a fellow yesterday just a block from here walking down Gould Street with a big pair of black rubber boots on and a sweatshirt that said, "I hate rubber boots." And it was amusing. And I thought, this guy has a quirky sense of humor. I wonder what he's all about. Ordinarily, I would have walked by and never known. Yesterday, I stopped and I said, "Excuse me, I really like that shirt and your contradictory message. What's the deal?" And he told me, and I said, "Can I take your photo? I'd love to take a photo of it." And he said, "Sure, why not?" So I took his photo standing on Gould Avenue with his rubber boots and his shirt. And then I said, "Are you in a hurry?" And he said, "Not particularly. I'm out for my morning walk." And I said, "I'm actually doing an amateur photography project as well. I took this photo just because I thought it was amusing. But if you had a few minutes, I'd like to take a few more photos and find out a little bit more about you and use you in my project." He said, "That sounds good to me. I like the sound of that project." So I took a few portraits of him, and we got to chatting a little bit. And he just said, "I had these rubber boots, and I know there's a shop not far from here that will print up custom shirts." And I thought, wouldn't it be a hoot to make up this shirt that's the opposite of the boots and go out and walk the street. So he said, "Will you do me a favor and send me the copy of the photo?" And I said, "I'd be glad to. I always offer to do that, in fact, when people are a part of my project."
Right.
And at the end of my taking the project photos and interviewing him a little bit, he said, "You're not going to forget about sending me the photo? Here's my email address." And he handed it to me. And I said, "By all means." So I sent him the photo that evening. And this morning I woke up and there was an email from him saying, "Hi, it's Matthew. I'm so pleased that you were good to your word and that you sent me the photos. I love them. And I really believe in what you're doing with your project. I've got a few other interesting outfits. Would you do me a favor of photographing me in some of my other outfits? I'd really appreciate it. I could meet you anywhere. I'm downtown." And I said, "I'd be glad to." So here's like just an interesting guy, but it's an example of I never would have had that interesting experience. And he wound up saying, I'd asked him what his interests were, and he said, I used to work for the government, I'm retired, I worked in finance. He said, I know government finance is an oxymoron, but there you have it. So it's another example of his sense of humor. And he said, and I just like to do my own thing. I love retirement. I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. I don't have to get up in the morning until I feel like getting up in the morning. And I like to sit in a jacuzzi and I play bridge. I said, oh, okay. So in his email, he said, by the way, I thought you would like to know, I met with my bridge group last night and I won my game. I like to think that our meeting on the street played a little role in starting my day in a good direction.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
So you bring happiness to his life.
Yeah. It seems that way.
What one thing you would do to change or stop doing in your life right now?
I should probably eat a little bit less and lose a bit of weight. And I should probably get more active. I mean, these are probably common kinds of themes.
What makes you think that will give you a happier life if you do that?
Well, I'm just thinking about the fact that I've always been a pretty active person. I've never been big on competitive sports, but I used to jog a lot, and then my knees and back started getting sore, so I stopped jogging and I started bicycling. And when I retired, my wife and I joined a cycling club, just a recreational cycling club, and I've really enjoyed that.
Right.
And I wound up then getting like tennis elbow from bicycling, and so my bicycling has been restricted. And
you
it's
get a
taking.
tennis elbow for bicycling?
I would have wondered about that as well, but I've had two doctors tell me that that's the only thing they can
repetitive.
sort of relate it to, and it fit in with when I'd had a bicycle accident. And then I was doing a lot of riding at the same time, and then it came on. But at any rate, so I have been less physically active, and probably gained 5 or more pounds in the process, and it looks like this elbow thing. Well, now winter's here, so I'm not going to do so much cycling. So I just realized that, and age is beginning to creep up on me. I'm going to be 70 at the end of December, and I've always had this sort of fear in the back of my mind that if you ever sit down, you might never get up again, or something like that. The key to maintaining your vitality is to keep moving. And so those things are weighing on my mind a little bit.
Right. And so you wanted to do more exercise and eat more healthier. But that's based on fear. Because for fear of what you might become.
That's true.
What I want to know is what one thing you do that would make you more happier. That would you either stop doing, that could make you happier, or one thing that you should be doing that make you happier. It's not what based on fear.
Maybe travel. My wife and I determined, we both enjoy traveling. We determined that with retirement, there would be the opportunity to do more travel, and in fact we have. But it's also possible to sort of get busy with day-to-day life and sort of figure, and funds are not unlimited for any of us.
Right.
And so it's easy to sort of think of that next trip and then figure, well, this isn't a good time because we're involved in this and that, and we have this expense coming up. But I was reading something online just the other day that made a lot of sense. It's a theme that's being explored by a lot of people in sort of popular psychology these days, that it's not things that make us happy so much as experiences that make us happy. And it is easy to sort of think, well, okay, we could take this trip and it would cost us like $4,000 or something, whatever, or we could buy this or pay this bill or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you think about your life, It's the experiences that you've had and the
what
people
you
you've had
remember.
them with that you remember.
Yeah. And I started this about 10, 15 years ago this way. Buy things that you really love or that you really need. I'm not anti-consumerism. I believe you do need things to live and you do need beautiful things to make you appreciate life. But what you don't need is things that you're collecting. I also find that when you buy things that you really love or need, you realize you don't need a lot of things.
Mhm.
So therefore you spend less money.
Mhm.
And that was able for me to travel to Asia for 6 months. How would you make that happen?
Book that next trip. kind of
Just do it?
Kind of simple. Just do it.
Just do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I met a fellow at the opening of my wife's art show
Mm.
last evening. He was mentioning that that he is he's retired and he's devoting his time to his art. And he was talking about that he does speaking engagements and does art demos in different places. And he doesn't have a car, so he was talking about the ingenious way he's figured out how to pack up all of his supplies and his equipment and take GO trains and buses and get out to clubs and do speaking engagements or judge shows and various kinds of things. And I sort of said, it sounds like you don't have a car.
Mhm.
And that was where he sort of explained, no, I gave up the car a few years ago.
Yeah.
And he said, it is an inconvenience, but he said, when I started looking at the cost of my insurance, the cost of my repairs, the cost of the fuel, et cetera, he said, without those, he said, I think I enjoyed my trip to Florence even more than I enjoyed my car.
Yeah.
Because I've got an alternative to the car, but I never would have gone to Florence if I hadn't saved
very
that
true.
money. And then I really enjoyed my trip to Munich a few months before that.
Yeah.
So,
No, most people don't realize how much money they spend on a car. I used to have a car and I gave that up in the late 90s. And I find that just doing that, I get less stress. Because driving, I always find myself to be very stressful after a while. And I find it not really enjoyable experience. It's convenient, but it's not enjoyable. And just by giving that up, it actually changed I think as well. And then that lead up to, a different way of living.
Yeah.
And then after I give up all the clock in my house, so I take away all the clock, all the time in the house. I say, well, where you have to be, then you have to be. So it's no point just checking it every 5 minutes,
yeah.
right? So simple little step that can enhance your life.
Mm.
So you like to have connection with people, and you find that building connection that what really vitality of your life and make you more happy and more interesting. So how do you attain all the time for the people around you? Because that seems like, we never have enough time for the people around us. So how do you prioritize?
And there was a period of time during that adjustment period where I was sort of combining my interest in this growing photography project with our time together.
Mm.
And that was kind of a minor disaster because I would be, looking for interesting people to meet and stopping to chat with them, and my wife would be standing around wondering, so what am I supposed to do with the next 15 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
And it caused a lot of tension and friction, and yet at the same time it was something that was really important to me to do.
Yeah.
And I think she realized that it was important for me to do, but it was something that was not really compatible with quality time together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with her interests and her art club. Is that I can't very well stand around watching
Somebody paint.
Watching somebody paint. Well, there's the expression of standing around and watching paint dry.
Yeah.
I love hearing about it and the process that she's going through and seeing the stages of her paintings develop and seeing her satisfaction.
Yeah.
But that's something that's hers. A lot of the time that I'm doing my photography, it's sort of while my wife is pursuing activities of her own.
Okay.
Primarily her art and her responsibilities with the art club, and then she has a sort of a coffee group that meets. When we first started our retirement, we began to discover that we each had interests of our own. And there was a need to be able to pursue certain things on our own that we didn't necessarily, being together 24/7 was not necessarily all that healthy. It's a question of finding balance, and I've
So
sort of discovered that with other retired people
Right.
too, is that they had to balance their lives.
What advice would you give somebody for a younger self in a relationship? They don't really have a self. They don't grow into their own skin anymore. They kind of overly dependent on each other, and I think that's very damaging for a lot of relationships, and it doesn't last. But from your successful relationship, what advice would you give them?
When my wife and I retired, all of a sudden we were together all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's this sort of vision, maybe unspoken vision, that retirement is going to be that the two of you are going to walk in step through every experience in life. And the fact of the matter was, we were used to spending like 8 to 10 hours in our own lives 5 days a week.
Right.
So it's like a huge kind of a change. And I think initially we were hesitant to pursue our own things because not all of those things were mutual or shared. My wife was hesitant to join the art club because she knew that was going to take her away from the household, like an evening or two a week,
Mm-hmm.
and the times that she was painting. Then I signed up for some of my courses downtown, which...
So how do you negotiate that within yourself and then with each other? So how do you negotiate?
I guess within myself, it's just that I knew that I had to be doing certain things for my own enjoyment,
Mm-hmm.
and that it was not necessarily any sort of a disloyalty to the relationship. So I'm just trying to think back. It wasn't that long ago that we retired. It was 3 years ago. And I can't describe the process exactly, but the water was a little choppy through that process because we didn't have a road map, and we didn't know, I think, whether doing some of our own things was going to take away from our relationship or whether it was wrong. And yet it just seemed to have to happen.
Did you have a conversation about it, or it just happened?
I think there was some talk about it, but it wasn't like some huge formal kind of a decision. It was just, I started taking my classes. My wife really wanted to be a part of the art club, and I said I had no problem with that at all, and it worked out, and I think it's been to our mutual benefit.
Right.
And I think it's easier to really enjoy quality time together if you're also getting some of the individual experiences that you didn't want.
Having your own experience also help with your own growth, and that in turn, help your relationship grow as well, because you bring new growth into the relationship instead of stagnate. After a while, there's nothing happening, and I think that in a relationship, that what happened to a lot of people, they become in dependency on each other, so the relationship doesn't have any fast growth in them because you're not growing as well. And I think that's what makes you more successful in the relationship, and also more as a couple or as a person, you become more happier as well.
Yeah.
Great. So thank you very much That was a wonderful discussion. So this is Jeff, and that is Take on Happiness. So I hope you enjoyed the show. Ciao.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very
Adam.
much.
Yeah, it was really a fun experience and thought-provoking.